All right, we are live on the Las Vegas Triathlon Club Facebook page. We're recording. I'm John Mercer, president of the Las Vegas Tri Club, and we're missing our co-host, Bob Gamble. He may be jumping on in a little bit, maybe running a few minutes late, but I wanted to go ahead and get started talking with Paul because Paul is a longtime triathlete. He started triathlons before I did. He's got me beat by a year. So this is going to be fun to reminisce. We already started talking about some of the classic races back in the 80s and early 90s. So, hey, and so our guest tonight is Paul Brandt. Hey, Paul, how's it going?
Hi, it's going great.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. This is really great to have you on. I love it when, I get to talk with someone who was really getting involved with triathlon right when the sport was beginning. And so it's going to be fun. I want to get your impressions of how it's similar and yet changed over the years.
Yeah, I'm upset with myself for not saving some of that old triathlon gear. You know, the big Scott
yeah, the Scott
aero
DH
bars.
Yeah, the Scott DH bars. Those were classic.
Huge, is what
Yeah,
they were.
They were. I never used them. My brother got them, but I never converted to them. So you used them?
I tossed them when I left Spokane for here.
Yeah.
So I still had them on and off my one bike for probably 20 years.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's amazing. So if people don't know, Scott DH bar was a special bar that they made specific for triathlon that was sort of like an amalgam. It was a mixture of a regular bike handlebar, but it was stretched out to be an aero bar. So it was an aero and road bike handlebar all in one.
It kind of preceded the clip-ons.
Yeah. So, that's great. Yeah, this would be fun talking about old gear too. Yeah, that's tough that you don't have that anymore. So, but maybe
My first triathlon, I rode on a Huffy bike.
A Huffy bike?
A Huffy bike.
Wow.
I think I paid $100 for it at Kmart.
Oh, I love it. and it probably weighed about 40 pounds.
About that.
Yeah, nice steel frame. Oh, that's great. All right, so you've been a club member for about 5 years. You're originally from Wisconsin, and you are happily retired now. Correct?
Yes.
Yes.
I always dreamed of retirement because I could do what I needed to do an Ironman. I'd have enough training time that no problem. That doesn't work out.
You're busier than ever, huh?
Yes.
Well, I know you've got a lot of neat hobbies from ham radio, and I saw the guitar in the background there. And so you've got lots of different things going on. So, and triathlon takes up a little bit of time.
It does. It does.
Right. Well, let's go back in time. I want to hear about your very first triathlon. It was 1984?
1984 on my 40th birthday.
Oh, wow.
So I was in a new age group. But they screwed it up and put me in the 35 to 39 age group.
Oh, that's weird.
But I finished 10th in that age group, and that was the cutoff for the nationals. So I made the nationals.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Wow. And a very competitive age group even back then.
Yeah.
All right. So which race was it?
Bud Light, the Bud Light series, and it was the trials for their nationals.
Okay.
So I did qualify for the nationals, but I would have gotten third place in the other age group. So,
yeah.
But hey, that was my very first triathlon.
And that was Houston?
Yes.
Oh, wow. So were you living in Texas at the time, or?
Yeah, I was living in Houston.
Okay.
And the race was done at Clear Lake City by NASA.
Okay. What got you to sign up for the race?
Well, I was a runner.
Okay.
And not not too bad of a runner. I did a 36, 38, 10K
That's great.
and a 2:49:33
Mm.
marathon.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic.
My dream was that marathon. I wanted to qualify for Boston.
Ah,
And this was back when the entry times were if you were under 39 years of age, you had to break 250
mm,
to make Boston.
okay.
That was, for me, that was really tough. I think I tried 5 or 6 times and I finally got the 2:49:33
Mm,
to get to Boston. So with all the work I put into that and all the dreaming I put into that and the all the guts I put into that,
yeah.
it was like, okay, now what? And I thought, I don't think I'm going to take an awful lot off my marathon time anymore.
Mm,
So I'd always kind of liked to ride the bicycle, and I grew up on Wisconsin lakes.
yeah.
So I said, I'm going to try this triathlon stuff. And Julie Moss was my inspiration.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that was 2 years before that then?
Yeah, I wrote that down someplace here in my
Yeah.
notes. So,
And
but yeah,
yeah, Julie Moss is, will you want to tell the story of why Julie Moss
she,
inspired you?
well, yeah, um, she was in the she was in the triathlon in Hawaii
Yeah,
that at this time had been kind of unfounded, or
yeah.
nobody had much thought anything about it or seen it or knew what it was or anything else, including her. I was reading a little article about her today, and she didn't really train for that.
Yeah.
And she got towards the end of the race and she was crawling.
Yeah.
I mean, the video that you see on Wide World of Sports or whatever it is, it's some female runner crawling towards the finish line. That's Julie Moss.
And that inspired you.
That inspired me. I thought, what is this nutcase doing? I can do that, something that dumb. So and when I found out that you didn't have to go that long,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that really sealed the deal for me.
Oh, that's so neat. So then you're training for Houston, and that's an Olympic distance event.
Yep.
And how did you, adjust from your run training to swim, bike, and run?
Well, swimming, despite the fact that I grew up in the water, I was not a very good swimmer, mostly because I didn't have the body for it. I didn't have the muscles for it. I was lucky if I could do a push-up.
Mm-hmm.
So I really had no strength for swimming. But I thought, okay, I need to get the distance because I'm a really good distance athlete. So I just did a lot of swimming in various pools around Houston. You had to drive forever to get to someplace to swim in, either the ocean off Galveston or
Mm-hmm.
Clear Lake City Lakes or something like that. And besides, I was always concerned that the alligators were coming after me anyway.
Yeah.
So I didn't ignore the swimming part, but all I did was put in my time.
Yeah.
So I knew I needed the bicycle to work on the bicycle. So I devoted quite a bit of time to the bicycle. And I knew that I was really strong in running and I could afford to give up a little bit of training in running.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I did.
Yeah.
Coast in the swim, beat my brains out on the bike.
Yeah.
Whatever I had left, go for it in the run.
Oh, I love it.
And that's kind of how I trained, and it worked out pretty well. I really had hoped, not having ever run a triathlon before, and I didn't know a brick from a concrete block.
Mm-hmm.
I really had hoped that I'd be able to break 40 minutes on the 10K.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't do it.
Yeah,
I think I was around 45 or
a little
46.
different getting off that bike.
Yeah, oh, yeah, no kidding.
N-
No kidding. And a couple of my running buddies caught up with me and were pacing me. And I finally just looked at them and I said, get the heck out of here.
Yeah. Oh,
I don't need you guys. You're
that's
driving
right.
me nuts. Ah, Paul, you can do it. You can do it. Yeah, but I can't do it with you nagging me the whole ways.
That's great. Oh, I love it. Okay, so the Bud Light series, I don't know, I didn't do the Houston one, but I imagine that was just as large as some of the other. I mean, they had thousands of athletes at these races. And wetsuit or no wetsuit?
Oh, never heard of a wetsuit.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think you could use them. Could you back then?
You know, I can't remember. I think I got a wetsuit somewhere early on, but and I know I used a wetsuit for some of the Bud Light races, but I don't know about
I didn't
those.
get a wetsuit until after uh, I think 1995.
Okay, yeah, I want to say about 88, 89 they started coming in. So.
Yeah, but that race was on the Bud Light race that I was in was on September 1st in Houston, where it's still hotter than
Yeah, it's
heck.
still hot and humid.
Yeah, so Clear Lake, it wasn't in the ocean, it was in the lake.
Mhm.
So it was reasonably warm. So I never thought anything about it.
Yeah.
I never thought anything about a wetsuit in a triathlon until I moved to Spokane back in the 90s.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay, so you got through the swim, you hammered the bike, you experienced your first T2, started
Oh,
running.
as I told you before we started here, the bike I was riding was an old Huffy that I bought at Kmart for $100.
I love it. That's awesome. And I think that's such a good message for people to hear. Yeah, especially that first race, get anything with two wheels.
Yeah,
But now you jump on the run and you still had a really good run.
yeah, yeah. It was, but I was back then. I was fast.
Yeah, yeah.
I was doing my 10Ks as a runner in well under 40 minutes,
Yeah.
36, 37.
Yeah. So what was it
in
like when
there.
you crossed the finish line?
I honestly don't remember. I can tell you what it was like when I crossed the finish line at the 70.3 that I
Yeah.
did, that we'll talk about at some point here.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think I was totally wiped. So I just,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. So then how soon after that first race did you say, I got to do this again?
fairly soon, I did a couple that fall, and probably waited about 3, 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a whole bunch of small ones around
Yeah.
Houston. So I did a couple of sprints,
Yeah.
but most of them back then were Olympic
Okay.
distance.
Yeah, that was probably. All right. So do you remember how long it took for you to get your results in the mail?
Oh my God. I'm not sure that I'm not sure. I may have finished my second marathon or my second triathlon before I got the results from the first.
Yeah. And did they have the
And
little pass book of it, or I remember Bud Light at one point we're doing little pass books of results. So
that I don't remember.
uh,
And partially because they put me in the wrong age group.
yeah,
And I fought with them about that for
yep.
6 months. And they finally said, no, they're not going to change it.
You'd have to print the whole
you
thing
qualified,
up again.
you qualified for the nationals, so
Yeah.
we're not going to change it.
Oh,
Okay. I'm not
That's
going to
great.
do any more triathlons.
yeah, right. Yeah, and for people who don't know, back in the 80s, you would not get your results right away. Well, you'd get, a podium and what have you, but then the results would be sent in mail and you'd be waiting anxiously for your splits.
Yeah, and now you get angry if they aren't, done within a minute of when you cross the finish
That's
line.
right. That's right. It's amazing how that's changed.
Where's my time?
It is pretty amazing how we are able now even to track people in real time. I mean, that was never even thought of back then. Okay, so now let's jump from the 80s to, oh, I want to hear about the 70.3. So you've dabbled in these different distances, but and I'll preface this with, before we started, you said, oh, 70.3, but I don't count it because it was so bad. Tell me about this.
Okay, Troika Triathlon in Spokane, and they've changed it now, but it was in July or August,
Okay.
and Spokane is on the east side of Washington State,
Mm-hmm.
where it gets pretty doggone hot
Yeah.
in the summer. 90 is fairly common. 100 is not unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I really wasn't very smart about the 70.3. Of course, then it was a half triathlon or a half Ironman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I I did my work. Did I go away there? Am I okay?
Yeah, yeah, you're good.
You see me?
Yeah, yep.
Okay. That's driving me nuts.
Uh-oh. You good?
Yeah,
Nope.
well, it's okay. I'm just not seeing myself. I'm seeing you.
Oh, it's the top right corner. There's a what says view, and you can probably click on that to change.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
good.
I got it.
All right,
Okay.
so there's 70.3. Wait, what year was
Okay.
it? What year?
So I did the work. I did the course. I went out and I was in fairly good shape. And one of my weaknesses that I didn't really discover was a weakness until after this particular race was I just always went nuts on the bike,
Mm,
and part of it was in my head because I had been a runner for so long and did pretty good times as a runner and knew my body well and all that kind of stuff. So it was a rolling course on the bike. Um, the uh, the swim went real well. It was
mm-hmm.
faster than I thought I'd go in the swim. Got on the bike, on the rolling course, and took off, and was just having a ball. Up the hills, down the hills, around the curves,
Mm.
paying absolutely no attention to how fast I was going. And I got to the park in the middle of Spokane where they had the transition to the run, and I didn't feel like I was dying at that time. And they gave me my little bag of junk and took my bike away, and I made my change and started running. And this was a course that was uh, uphill all the way out,
Mm-hmm.
not a steep uphill, a pretty modest uphill, maybe 2%, something like that. But nonetheless, it was an uphill. The one thing I did notice when I was changing from my bike to my shoes was that it was getting hot.
Mm.
Fortunately, Spokane is not humid because it's
Yeah.
a long ways
High
from
desert. Yeah.
Yep, so it's high desert, but it was getting hot.
Mm-hmm.
And as I don't think I slowed, I did slow down quite a bit more than I normally experienced. Uh, I thought it was more partly the distance and
Mm-hmm.
than it was anything else than the heat. Made the turnaround, and all of a sudden it hit me,
Mm.
and I started to walk. And walking for me was unheard of in a race. That was something I almost never did.
Yeah.
I walked in a marathon in Corpus Christi that was 85 degrees and 85% humidity.
That's killer.
Now, I walked a little bit in the last 10K of that. And I walked in Boston. Shouldn't admit to that. But I told myself, and again, this was well, maybe we'll talk about that later. But only maybe a half a mile, but I told myself I was not going to walk until I got up Heartbreak Hill.
Okay.
And I did okay. So at any rate, I started to walk, and it got hotter, and I'd run and I'd walk. And all of a sudden I saw them with these wagons full of ice.
Mm.
Handing out ice, and I'd never had ice handed to me before. So probably not 3/4 of the way yet, they ran out of ice, and the water was also getting scarce. And honest to God, I walked more than I ran in that race.
Oh.
And we got, and what was even worse, and then I started to get angry with the conditions, angry with myself. And we got back to Riverfront Park, and the last 50 yards was up a hill.
Oh, boy.
That did it.
Yeah.
Up the hill. And I told myself, you're not going to walk up this hill.
Oh.
You're going to run up this hill. So
I
ran up the hill, and I ran over the finish line, and they walked up to me with the little present that I got for running, and it was a hooded sweatshirt.
Oh gosh, yeah, last thing you need.
I said, thanks a lot. So I said, I did not complete a 70.3, not to my satisfaction.
Oh.
I mean, they gave me a time and all that. I actually, officially, I completed the event.
I don't know. That sounds like I'd count that one. That's brutal. And okay, so now let me ask you: do you still have the sweatshirt?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you still have the sweatshirt?
Yes, as a matter of fact, yeah. I still wear the sweatshirt.
There you go.
But it took me about 2 years before I put it on.
Well, this is so funny. I always think of you, and I know you to be a very mild manner, just very always level-headed. But I'm hearing a different side of you and the competitor coming out in this conversation. This is so cool. What year was that 70.3?
2002 or 2004.
Okay. So that's still an early stage in terms of race development, especially at 70.3. I mean, that's where you're on the front edge of doing those.
Yeah.
They may not even have called it a 70.3 at that point. Now, did they have aid stations spaced the way they do now back then?
I don't know if they had them spaced the way they do now. They had an adequate number of race stations.
Mm-hmm.
They had put this race on for maybe 5 years by this time. And they did a good job. It was a good race.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an issue of not enough stations. It was an issue of running out of ice and running out of water.
Mm-hmm.
Women were putting ice down the front of their shirt, and the guys were putting it in their hats and putting it on their head. It was brutal is the word for it.
Yeah.
It was awful.
That's you should definitely count that. So what's on your radar going forward then?
Well, the VR series that the Ironman put on was a godsend as far as I was concerned.
Mm-hmm.
You guys were gnashing your teeth and beating on your heads because they weren't having any triathlons anymore. And I saw these things and I said, hey, wait a minute, this is almost as good as a real thing. And when you're 75 years old and running the speed I run, it didn't really matter that much whether I was competing with other people, because usually there are only 3 people in my age group anyway.
Well,
And as it turns out, in the VR, I cut that down to 1 person in my age group, me.
yeah, but
So
that is so amazing, Paul, that you are still racing at 75. I mean, I love it. That's one of my goals, is to be the oldest person in a race. So I love it that you're there doing it.
yeah, I don't know if I'll make that or not, but if I if my the few physical issues that I do have, uh, and they aren't anything to sneeze at, if they don't get any worse, I think I'll be okay for
Yeah.
a few more years. But I have to quit falling off my bike.
Oh,
Um, that really screws you up. But at any rate, so I'm going to continue with some of the VRs. I've got one coming up next weekend, the Memorial Day weekend. I'm doing an Olympic one,
hmm,
uh, and I've got some help from people in the club to make sure I've got somebody out there in the water with me, uh,
good,
in
good.
case I drown. They can tow me in,
Oh,
and
you're a very competent athlete. This is great to hear. Okay, so now you've been doing this since 84. You're 75 now. So what advice do you give to that person who says, "Hey, I'm going to sign up for a triathlon for the first time"?
well, I kind of got to pick their brain a little bit and see where they are really.
Mhm.
um, I don't think that there's very many people who are not already competent athletes of some kind that can do even a sprint um, triathlon. So you really got to determine where they are,
Mhm.
and, and what their motivation is. Uh, and what do they need from somebody like me, or somebody like you, or somebody like the club? uh, what's their expectation, and can I help them fulfill that expectation? And again, that's really going to depend so much on where they are.
Mhm. Oh, that's great. No, I think you're right. I think you do need to tease that out. So, your secret to longevity. How have you been able to do this for a long period of time, let alone, I'm sure you've had injuries along the way, but I'm even just thinking, you've accomplished a lot over this time period.
Part of the, I think part of the reason that I've been able to compete for this amount of time is that at least for about the first 3 quarters of my career as a triathlete and runner, I didn't get injured.
Mm,
My body was apparently made so I could take a lot of abuse. Uh, I mean, I was not a national class runner by any stretch of the imagination. I could score in the top 3 of my age groups,
mhm.
even when I was under 40. But um, I wasn't, you know, I wasn't blazing fast,
Mhm.
but I could run forever.
Yeah.
Um, and the longest week of running I ever put in was 103 miles.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
And I think that was when I was 39.
Yeah, it's serious running.
And my coach at the time, I don't know how many people know running coaches. Jim McClatchy was my coach.
Mm,
Jim had a number of national or world class uh, marathoners that he coached.
mm,
Marty Freilich, I don't know if you remember that name. Uh, he had a woman in the last marathon trials. So, and was he was Scottish, and that should say a lot.
yeah.
But Jim, one of our workouts one year, one of our long workouts, and he never did it again, thank you, Jim, was 30 miles.
Oh, wow.
So, normally your long run is 20.
Yeah.
So at any rate, we're running out of time here. Big mouth.
No, this is great. I love it.
So then when about 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, and it didn't start out as being anything that I did, but I was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm.
So that, and fortunately, they caught it very early, and it was surgery. And that's it. I didn't have to do any of the chemo or any of that kind of stuff.
That's fortunate. Yeah.
But they took a fairly good chunk of my colon out,
Oh.
and it took like 8 weeks to kind of start to. I got out running fairly soon, about 3 or 4 weeks. I got out just jogging a little bit, but I couldn't really start doing any type of a workout or anything until 6 or 8 weeks in, and even then it was pretty slow. And so I kind of recovered from that and really kind of got back on the ball, and came down with prostate cancer.
Oh.
And again, it was early, and it was surgery and none of the rest of that crap. But there was more pain involved, and it was a more difficult recovery. So once again, it was back to the drawing board.
Mm.
And then when all this was going on, I had one of the incisions from one of the early abdominal surgeries that I had opened up. So they had to go in and repair that. Oh. And you ready? A year after that, inguinal, what do you call it? It was another abdominal surgery at any rate. Oh. that I had to have. And it wasn't quite as severe, but it still, again, it set me back. I mean, this was a series of like 4 years. Yeah. It was, this, that, the other thing. And then we moved here, and I got myself a new bike and was up on the trail, and some walkers cut across in front of me, and I crashed pretty severely on the trail and broke my hip.
Oh, wow.
And I've had 1 or 2 other crashes in the meantime. And, they take anywhere from, and part of the problem is the older you get, the longer it takes to recover.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this last one that I had, I crashed in January, and my wife said, you got to start watching what you're doing. I said, thanks. So it takes so much longer to recover now. Instead of 4 weeks, it's gone past 6 weeks, past 8 weeks. And I'm just really back to where I think I can start doing speed work after my January crash. No, it was fairly late in January, but still, it was not fun. So
this is so great for people to hear, because, I always say, everyone has a story, but to hear what you've overcome, especially in the later part of your triathlon career, is really remarkable. So congratulations on recovering from and beating cancer twice at this point. So that's fantastic. And then all the other things that you've had along the way, including the bike crash, which is, serious, and a broken hip. I mean, that's really amazing that you've been able to overcome that. And so I think back to the story of your first race in Houston and the grit that you showed to finish that on that run. I think that grit is showing up in your later years here too.
Yeah, I try to tell myself, you can do it. You can do this. Yeah. You're not nuts. You can still do it. Yeah. And usually I can. It just takes a little longer. I asked my doctor on this last one, after I went in, when can I ride my bike?
He's thinking you're crazy.
I said, is 2 weeks too soon? And she said, well, you maybe ought to give it at least 4 weeks.
Oh,
As it turned out, it was 6 weeks before I got back on the
oh,
bike. But
that's fast still.
that's also something that uh, your indoor bike is really helpful for.
Mm-hmm.
When I broke my hip, I was on that bike about 3 weeks after I did
Mm-hmm.
I broke my hip. So slow, a mile,
Yeah.
but you just start to add it and add it
Yeah.
and add it. And fortunately, my hip healed by itself.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor thought he wanted to put a hip replacement in, which might have ended my career.
Yeah.
But when he looked at it, he said, no, it's looking pretty good. Just leave
Good.
it alone.
Yeah. Well, and again, this is great for people to hear, is that when you do get injured, you do need to take the right time to recover. All right. So now I'm really interested. We're going a little bit long, but I do want to ask this question because I am curious. You've been doing this for such a long period of time. You've had some successes, and you've overcome these injuries and situations. If you think back, what moment do you think of as your most proudest moment?
I think my my Boston qualification, the
Mm,
Houston Tenneco Marathon in, I think it was 84 or 85, um, when I did my 2:49:33,
mhm,
uh, because it was I don't think it probably could have been more perfect. It was
mhm,
it was the race. I I pushed it as hard as I could, not necessarily as hard as I wanted to. And it always before it was by the time I got to the last 10K, I was pretty much dying and I was losing it and I knew I was losing it.
mm,
And I wasn't missing it by a minute. I
mm.
was missing it by 6 minutes, by 10 minutes, which was still pretty decent.
Yeah.
But in fact, there were a couple of them that I was missing it by 15 minutes.
Oh,
And even though I was trained for it, but it was because I wasn't running smart enough.
mm,
But everything came together. It was a great day. I took it somewhat easy,
mhm.
although maybe I shouldn't tell you this because it's don't do this.
Yeah.
The gun went off, I took off,
Yeah.
and I was just cruising. It was wonderful. It was beautiful. All of a sudden, I'm seeing people that I never saw before. I was seeing women that I knew were faster than I was.
Uh-huh.
I did the first mile of that marathon in 5 minutes and 42
Oh
seconds.
goodness, that's that.
I thought, there goes that marathon.
Yeah, you're going to pay the price.
Fortunately, I cut it back enough and did it early enough
Yeah.
and got back on where I was supposed to be and ended up with a PR.
That's fantastic. That is really a race to be proud of. And I love it that your proudest moment is your qualifying race as opposed to the Boston race itself. I mean, that really speaks to, the importance I see you place on just that grit. I'm really, this is really impressive what you can push yourself through. So that's fantastic.
Boston and uh, the other nationals that I did was the Senior Olympics or
Mhm.
senior games in Albuquerque 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and but both that one and the Boston one were fun races. They were fun. I
Yeah.
mean, I enjoyed myself in those. I didn't necessarily enjoy myself from a fun standpoint in my marathon PR. I enjoyed it because it was so good.
That's
But
good.
the other ones, it was, I was taking it all in.
Yeah, that's
Like
good.
New York, same thing.
And that's important, because you qualified it and it's you to enjoy the race experience at the same time. That's important. Paul, this has been
Well,
so great. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
one quick story about another friend of mine,
All right.
who I'm not sure it's true, but I think it is. Don was a golfer though, and he always wanted to beat 80. So, he's got his goals too. And one day when he was about 35 years old, he was out on the golf course and having the game of his life. He finished in under 40, walked off the back of the green towards the water hazard, threw his clubs in, and walked away. He'd done it. He
Yeah,
made his goal.
and that's it.
And that's the last time he played golf. So I'm not advocating that. Get out there and do it again.
I love it. That's a great message, and that's what I look at doing this for such a long period of time. You've checked many boxes along the way, but yet you keep going, and that's really so great, and it's really inspiring for me and for others to see you out there on the course, really just working hard. And now I see that competitor in you. Now I know a lot more. I'm glad I never had a race in your age group. That's good. Hey, Paul, this has been great.
I had a good time. I had fun.
Yeah, this has really been great to talk with you. I've enjoyed it, and I really respect what you bring to the table, and it's been fun to reminisce a bit as well. So thanks for doing this.
And thanks to everybody for giving us likes for this program today.
That's right. Awesome. All right, Paul, have a nice evening.
Okay, you too. Thanks. Bye, everyone.